Welcome to the UnToxic Boss. I am your host, Janine K. Brown, and I am so happy to be back here with you all today. Did y'all watch the presidential debate last week? I hate that I saw some of it, but that is something that we're not going to dive too deep into. But we are going to talk about something that was said repeatedly during the debate. Our show today is going to talk about, what's really going on. And we're going to look at the heart of workplace culture, equity, and leadership. We're going to tackle a deeply ingrained and damaging myth, the concept of Black jobs. And maybe any racially identified job, right? So when we align race and maybe even gender to jobs, I think one of the things that we've been able to do is kind of debunk some of the myths around gender roles and gender related jobs, right? We've made far more progress, I believe, in that than maybe what we've made in the area of race. For example, you see more nurses that are men. You see more women going into construction. I saw a segment on, I think either local news or 60 Minutes or something that was highlighting the number of women who are now owner operators of tractor trailers, so truck drivers, large truck drivers. And even specifically, they were talking about the number of women who drive trucks for UPS and other logistic and delivery companies. So we've seen some progress there, right? We've seen that. We haven't necessarily seen the progress related to race-related ideologies for jobs, right? So the candidates for president in the United States who are also baby boomers, I can see how this kind of mirrors how this somewhat shows up in the workplace. Right. So today on our episode, we're going to talk about these recent comments from former President Donald Trump and current President Joe Biden and how that reflects outdated perspectives held on by so many baby boomers and perspectives that significantly impact the workplace, inclusion, and diversity. So stay tuned. We're about to unpack these biases. We're about to talk about some of the issues related to generations in the workplace. And on today's episode, specifically baby boomers. As a coach and some of the work that we do in our organization, we hear complaints a lot about the older generation. And that older generation happens to be younger baby boomers. So the youngest baby boomers are 60 years old. They are still in the workplace. A lot of them have many years ahead of them to still be in leadership roles or on teams and in capacities in the workplace. And unfortunately, just like our presidential candidates, they say some stuff. And I promise y'all, some of my favorite people are baby boomers. And I talked about that in the blog that I wrote earlier this week. You can see the blog in the chat window here, or you can see it also in the show notes, or go to the Everyday-Lead website and you can download that. So that's my company website is everyday-lead.com. You can also read that article and any of our other articles on the site. Let's get to it, y'all. What in the world is a Black job? That whole ideology that they were discussing, that Mexicans specifically was the quote, are taking Black jobs. Now, first, the idea that certain jobs belong to specific racial groups is baseless and is a harmful stereotype, but it still persists. It is something that we still do unconsciously, and some of us consciously have this ideology. When we do a workshop on leadership, and one of the activities in the workshop is we pass out paper, we give people crayons, and I ask them, draw a leader, right? So they draw out a leader, their characteristics. We see all sorts of cute little drawings. We have volunteers stand up in front of the room and they, describe their drawing and they talk about the characteristics of this leader that they've drawn. And oftentimes the pronouns that they use to describe this leader are masculine. It's he, him. They often refer to a male character in their story for leadership. And so even in 2024, in the workplace where there are so many women in leadership roles, leading teams and departments, leading businesses, we still see men as leaders. And then also, I think, unfortunately, race becomes a big part of that. I will say, I want to pause for a second and commend every person on TikTok and every person on the gram who took this Black jobs fiasco and this unfortunate bias from these two men and made some really humorous reels from them. And the reason I'm pausing is because I read someone say, I can't believe people are making a mockery out of this. For so long, Black people and underrepresented people had to lean on humor to deal with the foolishness that we are targeted with on a day-to-day basis. I think this is where some of our great comedians, Black comedians, have come from, and other comedians of other races. We have to take these discriminatory and bias and prejudice ideologies and make fun of them. And so I saw so many great things online about them. But let's get back to the topic. So this term Black jobs suggests that there are certain roles that are inherently suited for Black individuals and others are not, kind of reinforcing this harmful stereotype. So one of the candidates made a comment that Mexicans are taking Black jobs. And we know that Mexicans that are still kind of first coming across the border into this country are taking jobs that are very high labor jobs, jobs that require work in agriculture, maybe domestic work like housekeepers and things like this. And it's really interesting that these two gentlemen from their generation, older baby boomers, they're in their 80s, and late 70s. They're within 3 years of each other. They're very old men and they're baby boomers, and they have this historical perspective of these concepts that are rooted in segregation and discriminatory labor practices, where Black people were confined to low status, low paying jobs that I think some people believe that they are labor and not leaders, that these jobs that require high levels of cerebral thinking, critical thinking skills that Black people are not suited for. And I find it really interesting, and unfortunately, that President Biden kind of slid into the mud of using this language and maybe accidentally doubled down in using these terms, because he is surrounded by a diverse group of leaders in his administration and in his cabinet. And he worked for one of the most brilliant men in this country and the first Black president of the United States, President Barack Obama. I'm not going to give either one of them a pass. I think they both unconsciously use this language, but this stereotype still persists. Have you ever seen someone on your team get promoted, a Black woman or a Black man get promoted, and they were great as team members, but they get promoted, they're now in a leadership role, and what we find, the data shows that people will either leave their role, do not want to work for that person as a leader. Complaints go up, they will transfer to another team or another department, for the sake of, because a lot of people can't imagine themselves working for a Black person. And so we see this happening. And so we know that it is really, really prevalent. And unfortunately, it creates a toxic workplace. And so how can you become an untoxic boss in these sorts of scenarios? The first thing is you got to let go of this language, right? We cannot be using terms that we like Black jobs and someone's taking a job. And what we see on the flip side of that coin is that when we see more Black people get promoted, right, they are experienced. Their experience is the same as their white colleagues. They might even be more credentialed, right? Because we've seen an uptick of Black professionals getting advanced degrees beyond their undergrad. So master's degrees, PhDs, and multiple certifications. But we also find that when they are promoted, there's this conversation that we've seen, unfortunately, of white men often and others believing that their job was taken, right? Someone took their job, because we associate the promotions and the success of Black people and tie it directly to affirmative action or diversity goals, and not the fact that they earned this job. So what is the impact this has on these outdated views on workplace diversity, right? So when leaders and colleagues hold these outdated views, they can unintentionally create barriers to inclusion and diversity, but they also isolate these professionals of color. They make them, they put them in a situation where they're constantly having to prove that they belong in those roles, which takes away from their ability to fully execute and lead in a really positive way. And so we got to watch that, right? These views can lead to biased decision-making and hiring, promotions, lack of long time periods for promotions, work assignments that that don't meet the level of their abilities, right? So we find that they're getting more administrative and tactical work assignments versus those that are more operational or strategic. So these things limit opportunities for Black professionals. And we got to be able to recognize how that shows up. So how does this show up? How language like someone took my job, or I didn't get promoted because they're promoting Black people. So comments like that kind of undermine the efforts of Black professionals in the workplace. And any other professional, right? I remember when I was at Deloitte, and they had a pretty aggressive goal of increasing the number of women into the partnership. And I remember being in my practice, and a woman got promoted to partner, and there was a senior manager, white male senior manager, who was very upset. And he literally said, they promoted her and took my promotion from me, right? So he worded it as if something was given to him and taken away from him, and she did not deserve her promotion. And so we see that. So what is the role of merit and entitlement that comes into these conversations around who should be promoted and what sorts of jobs should be held by certain people? So let's talk about true merit and its importance. So meritocracy rewards individuals based on their skills, their abilities, and contributions, irrespective of race, gender, or any other characteristics that they hold, right? So you have done the work, your skills, your abilities, they are the reason why we are promoting you. Meritocracy also ensures that the best candidates rise to the top, fostering a culture of excellence and fairness. Now, in order for that to happen, we have to have an equitable performance review process, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So how bias and entitlement overshadows merit and deserving. I bet y'all seen it in the workplace. So how does that show up? Bias can lead to the perception that Black professionals or other non-white, heterosexual, cisgender, Christian male professionals are promoted due to quotas or affirmative action rather than their qualifications or merit. So when we talk about Black jobs, we try to debunk that they should only be labor and not leaders. What happens is when they get promoted, there's this conversation about affirmative action, right? And it's interesting because when we even talk about affirmative action and diversity goals or quotas, the beneficiaries of this work that Black professionals have labored in to move the needle around more inclusive workplaces and fairness and equitable behaviors and practices around hiring and promotion and advancement, the beneficiaries of that work, right, that we've done, even at great personal loss, has been most rewarded and received by white women. So we see that the beneficiaries of affirmative action and diversity and inclusion are white women. The data is clear. It is out there. However, those conversations often lean toward if a Black professional in your organization moves up in the ranks, that was affirmative action, as if they don't belong or they haven't earned that. And I've seen that even when we talk about how to create more inclusive environments in organizations, the work that we do in this space, when we're working with teams, we often hear language like, well, we got to make sure that they're qualified. We got to find the right candidate. They use all of this qualifying language. And I often have to, I let it play out. And then I often go back to them and say, well, are you all in the business of hiring unqualified candidates? Because when we talk about promotions and we talk about leadership in organizations, we make an assumption that white men, who are often the majority of leadership in organizations, are best qualified to lead other people. That they're the best ones to, be in the chief roles. They're the best ones. They're more qualified and developed, right? Because we have this, because they get points for the possibilities. They get points for potential. They get points for potential, right? While everyone else is out here trying to earn it, and the ladder and the bar keeps moving for them. So this perception undermines the achievements of Black professionals and perpetuates this sense of entitlement among some other and some white employees, right? So this is one of the reasons that we have to debunk these belief systems, right? So what's the impact of perceived entitlement and workplace fairness when it comes to promotion? So when some individuals feel entitled to certain positions, right, to get promoted to partner, to be in a leadership role, a department head, without recognizing their systemic advantages, it fuels this resentment and discrimination. Right? So I don't recognize the fact that I have an advantage because the majority of the workplace looks like me. I am probably over mentored, have a number of sponsors. My name is coming up in the rooms. People don't mix up my name with others, right? So everybody knows that Joey, who Joey is, but they mix up, Trey and DeAndre. They get them mixed up. So this entitlement can lead to policies and behaviors that marginalize Black professionals and other marginalized groups. And so we got to be really careful with that. So you're saying, well, Janine, let's talk about merit a little bit more. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it when we look at evaluations and feedback. So the lack of relationship building between Black employees and white colleagues and managers affect evaluations. Bias can affect how feedback is given and received. White managers may struggle to build relationship with their Black employees due to unconscious biases or unfamiliarity, or they feel like if they give direct and honest feedback that they're going to be seen as racist. And that is completely untrue because Black professionals, I know when I was working in an organization, I wanted quick, direct feedback. I wanted to know what I was doing well, what I could be doing better, and I wanted actionable steps. Tell me what I need to do. Who do I need to talk to? How do you want this to look, right? Be very specific with me. And this can lead to these incomplete and unfair evaluations. So without strong relationships in the workplace, feedback may focus on perceived deficiencies rather than constructive growth, which stalls career progress for Black employees, right? So how I communicate could be perceived also, using language like, oh, she's going to get upset or emotional or angry or maybe even intimidated. Right? I remember being described as being intimidated by people I was intimidating to people in the workplace. I didn't even know what that meant. I was just me. I was just Janine showing up. But terms like angry and intimidating or combative or hard to deal with are often used to describe Black professionals, which perpetuates these negative stereotypes. These biased descriptors can unfairly influence performance reviews and career advancements for opportunities. And when often they're just showing signs of confidence and being comfortable in their skin and a willingness to do hard work, is often mislabeled. I will say that a lot of Black professionals are confident. They feel highly skilled and they want to succeed. They're highly motivated. They're dedicated to the organization and they're dedicated to the work, just like everyone else. But I think there's this bias when they are direct. They speak to you directly. They look you in the eye. There's these other words that are used to describe this level of confidence that are held by these professionals. So this biased feedback and these evaluations can lead to missed promotions and limiting professional development for Black employees. Constructive feedback is essential for growth, but when it is tainted by bias, it hinders progress and reinforces inequity. Another way this shows up in the workplace is promotion practices that constantly move the bar. Right? So a professional starts off believing they understand what it's going to take to be promoted, and then time for promotion, there's a list of things that they still need to do. So the inconsistencies in performance standards for Black professionals often face this moving bar where the criteria for promotions are inconsistent and are more stringent compared to their white colleagues. Again, that, potential versus, you earned it. So there's this double standard that creates unfair barriers to advancement. These shifting standards prevent Black professionals from advancing, and then it leads into a conversation of qualification, right? We find Black professionals, but they just can't cut it. And one of the things that I know for sure, just from being a Black woman and a Black professional, is that we will not continue to jump over hoops. right? I think Black professionals are more likely to leave an organization where they feel undervalued. They don't feel a sense of belonging. And so that idea of we find them and they just can't cut it and they leave, I think organizations have to take responsibility for the fact that Black professionals are more likely to leave in higher numbers in a faster time period when they don't feel as if they belong, or that there's this shifting standard of what it takes to advance in an organization. Black professionals may meet or exceed job requirements, but still are overlooked for promotions due to this changing or unclear standard, right? The bar keeps moving. These practices undermine confidence and can lead to disengagement and attrition. Like, we're like, peace, we're out of here. So what are some real life examples of Black professionals with similar or superior credentials being overlooked from promotions? Or how they're treated in organizations. I have so many friends who've been promoted to partner in law firms and public accounting firms and consulting firms. And when they're out at clients or they're working with colleagues from different offices, it's automatically assumed that a younger, less qualified person on the team, often a white male, is the more senior person, right? The Black professional is overlooked, or they're shocked and in disbelief that this person is a partner in this organization and everyone around the table reports to them. So, we have to be able to move past these ideas that, if there's a Black woman at the table, that she's an administrative support professional versus, she's the partner in the room. This even happened to me when I moved to Atlanta and I started working in public accounting. One of the partners, we were at a social event at someone's home. One of the partners came up and introduced himself because he didn't recognize me. And he said, who do you support here at the company? What group are you in and who do you support? Well, I'm new to the company. I hadn't even been there 4 weeks and I didn't know what that language meant, right? So I'm like, I support everybody. I'm in the state and local tax practice and I support everyone. And he was like, you're going to be working with Tammy. Well, Tammy was one of our executive assistants. She was great. And, but no, I wasn't. Actually, Tammy was going to be working for me. And those are the things that happen to Black professionals in the workplace. This partner assumed I was an executive assistant, but not a senior consultant that was hired to come work with the company. So his first instinct was she must be administrative support and not a consultant coming in to work with some of our largest clients in the tax department. And so this is how that shows up. And then that creates this narrative in our head of us constantly having to prove that we belong. So where do the baby boomers come into this? Because I kind of tagged them in today's show topic. Well, the need for baby boomers and other generations to recognize and challenge their own biases is critical. And it's crucial specifically because there are baby boomers still in the workplace who have these belief systems. And I promise you, some of my favorite people are baby boomers. And I even have family members, I'm just going to call us all out, who make comments that are not acceptable or appropriate in the workplace. And they're fueled with bias and rigid to their unlearning, their unwillingness to unlearn language, behaviors, and commentary that is undermining to individuals. And so baby boomers, and this is why we have younger professionals just waiting for the baby boomers to retire or die. And I hate to use that language, but I've been in conferences with students and we ask these sorts of questions and students will say, well, those baby boomers need to just leave or they need to go somewhere and just die, because they are even impacted and they're sick of it, right? They are sick of this sort of commentary that creates division in the workplace. Baby boomers have to acknowledge that these biases exist and they have to be willing to take the steps to make positive and constructive change in the workplace. Because we can't just get rid of people. I don't support the narrative that they need to retire and die. I do support the conversation and the narrative that they need to do some work, they need to change, and they need to be aware of the impact of their comments in the workplace. And we see that with our presidential candidates. The things that they said during the debate and how they referenced different groups of of people, women, Mexicans, and blacks, right? And this idea that they thought that they were saying something positive, but it was riddled with toxic bias that black people need to be back in the fields doing labor and not being owners and leaders in the workplace and in entrepreneurship. So, what are some of the broader implications for the workplace culture? So, racial biases are toxic and they divide the workplace. They create a workplace that is not psychologically safe or healthy or productive for the culture. And so, when psychological safety, again, it's this belief that you can be your whole self at work, you can speak up and make mistakes, that you are promoted in a timely manner because of your ability, that you've earned it, right? Your skills and your abilities have been demonstrated at a superior level in a consistent way, where when there is an opening, that you are the first person that comes to mind for promotion. So we have to implement bias training and awareness programs. They also need to be in schools, right? This is a conversation that needs to start happening long before people start working. This needs to be happening in our school system, K through 12, higher education. We need to be having these conversations. We need to establish clear, fair policies for promotions and evaluations. Our feedback needs to be timely, direct, and actionable so that our employees, everyone knows what it takes so that we can stop moving the bar on certain people. And we need to create programs that support the growth and development of underrepresented leaders in the organization. So how can we do this? We have to start encouraging more dialogue and feedback to continuously improve the workplace culture. So I want to give you a call of action. First things first, if you imagine who should be in roles, specific roles in your organization, and it's based on race and gender and other things, you are the problem. Yeah, you're the problem. If you think that only white men should be in these roles, or that black people should not be your boss, that someone who is Asian doesn't have enough confidence to serve in a leadership role, whatever the bias is, you're the problem in the organization, and you need to check yourself. You need to be able to first say, look, I need some work. I need to do some work on myself. I need to take some training. I need to read some books, right? I need to move out of this organization because I am the problem and I'm holding people back. We need to encourage more listening and reflect on our own biases and behaviors. And we all have it. Because if you have a brain, if you lived any time, you have a bias about how you've been impacted or affected, or maybe even conversations, something that was taught to you about a particular group of people that you might need to work on. We need to invest in inclusion training for all employees. We need to have informal and formal conversations about how to create more equitable policies for promotion, work assignments, and again, evaluations. We need to support people in a more direct way in organizations. And we need to use language that reflects the values of all individuals, avoiding stereotypes and these biased descriptors. I hope today's conversation is something that you can reflect on. And again, feel free to check out the blog that gives a lot more detail and outlines this conversation for those of you who love to read and can take this information and use it with your organizations. Reach out to us. Our team at Everyday Lead, we're here to help companies create cultures where people come to work. They work for companies that they love, and they love the work that they do, and they want to stay there. And we want to help you do that in a place where there's psychological safety. If you are managing a conference and you're looking for a keynote speaker to talk about these sort of topics, please reach out to us. If it's not me, it's someone on our team. And we have some great topics that we'd like to share with you. But I just want to thank you for joining us today on the UnToxic Boss. It's clear that dismantling harmful myths of Black jobs and addressing outdated perspectives is a crucial step towards supporting and creating an inclusive and equitable workplace. Remember, fostering diversity isn't just a moral imperative. It's essential for the success and well-being of all employees. So join me and let's commit to challenging our biases, promoting true merit-based success, and envisioning a future where everyone and every individual can thrive. Stay tuned for more insightful discussions, and until next time, keep leading with empathy and equity. Thank you for listening to the UnToxic Boss podcast, where we are here to help you not be a jerk at work. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Follow us on social media for more updates and insights. Together, we can build a workplace where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. We want to introduce you a resource that we know that will impact your life and your career. It's a book, Unstuck and Unstoppable. It is the ultimate guide to overcoming obstacles and achieving your goals. With practical tips and inspiring stories, the book will help you leverage your value, increase your visibility, and gain recognition to accelerate your career. Get your copy anywhere you buy books, either on Amazon or at our website at unstuckandunstoppablebook.com.